All right, and welcome back to part 3 of my video series on processing and planning and shooting a mosaic of the Veil Nebula complex. So last time we went through actually, going through and testing that our initial captures were working right and doing kind of an initial mosaic. And now that we've gone and done all that and we're pretty confident that everything's set up right, I've run through and actually taken all my images, and it's time to start putting it all together. So the first thing was calibrating, processing, the integration of the individual panels. And for those, they came out pretty well. As we go through these, I'm just looking at the HA ones, and all of them look pretty great. Now it's time to start putting them all together. The first thing I did here, just for the video, is I went and did an integer resample on my images and downsampled them. I had done drizzle integration, which upscales everything, so the files were becoming very, very big, and that's fine when I'm processing on my own and I can let the computer grind away for a long time. But for the videos, I wanted to speed some things up. So each of these has been downsampled quite a bit. So if we go in, you'll notice the stars are very pixelated, but the files are also a whole lot smaller. So don't get discouraged if it looks like, oh, he's working with really small files. It's just to speed up the video here. So I've got good looking files here. They've just had the integration done on them. And, it's time to go ahead and start making the mosaic, just like we did in the steps before. So the first part was we need to go ahead and register where these things are in the sky. Do a plate solve on this so that when we start putting the panels together, we can use the mosaic by coordinates script. So the script that we used last time for doing the coordinates here was under image analysis, image solver. And you'll notice that I've got some kind of wacky numbers in here for resolution and things like that. My focal length was actually 570 millimeters in here. But one thing to keep in mind is your coordinates here need to be pretty close. So I would recommend going back to your actual target in, say, Sequence Generator Pro and just fill in the exact values that you had in there for that panel. That'll make it a whole lot easier for this thing to know where it is. Second thing is on your specs for focal length, or resolution if you're doing that. Your resolution will change if you upsample or downsample. So if you do drizzle integration, you need to go ahead and divide your original arc seconds per pixel by 2. Conversely, because I downsampled this 4 times from the drizzle, I took that drizzle number that I had used on my own when I was doing this and I multiplied it by 4. It doesn't have to be exact down to this decimal. I was just grabbing the number. And as long as you get it within the ballpark here, you'll be in good shape. The last parameter that's really important if you've been doing upsampling, downsampling, etc., is I would go, instead of using the triangles alignment algorithm, I would make sure to use the polygons one. It's a little bit more robust, a lot less prone to failure. When I was doing this on my own for my own ones, I was just really having a lot of trouble trying to change my star sensitivity and all this other junk to get it to match, when really what I needed to do is have the exact numbers from Sequence Generator Pro in here, get this in the right ballpark, and then change that to polygons. So once you do that, it's just going to run on the active window. Once again, you could do it on the batch, but I normally like kind of watching and making sure it worked one at a time here. So you go ahead and click OK. This will run pretty quick because it's such a small image. And we can see reach the maximum number, image solved. Great. So now let's put that data on there. You do that for all of the 4 here, and then you want to make sure that you save those files so that you keep that data on the file here. So I've already done that for all of these 4. Now we want to run that other script of mosaic by coordinates. So once we pick that one, we've got our files here, and then we want to go ahead and run them. So we'll go ahead and run them. Now, even with smaller files, this can take a minute, so we'll come back as soon as it's done. All right, so it's finished, and what that process did, just like last time, is it created 4 panels all lined up so that they match with each other there. So that's great. Now we've got these together and we should be ready to go ahead and merge. At least that's what you would normally think, especially since that's what we did in the last video. It merged up pretty well and we saw that they overlapped. So let's actually run this gradient merge mosaic and see what our result comes out looking like. Spoiler alert, it's not going to be perfect, but it's a first start to help us figure out our next steps. Now, once again, this is super fast with small files. On the bigger files, that hitting that merge button may take 15-20 minutes for it to run. So, now we've got it. Moment of truth. Dun, 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 dun. On first glance, you're like, yay! And then you start noticing problems, right? So, let's open this up a little bit bigger. It did put them all in the right place, which is great. In general, I don't have the seams on there, also great. But we can kind of start noticing problems in some of these areas here, right? And there's a few reasons for that. The first is we have not done any background extraction on these yet. So we have additional gradients in the files that themselves that we need to get rid of that you might not have noticed when we were doing the individual just subframes as a test. And then the second bit is you'll notice these dark areas especially are coming in at the seams where one of these stops here, but the other one has an image kind of coming out to here. So it's trying to say, well, image 1 is black here. That's a purposeful black, it's thinking, not the edge of the image. So it's trying to do a gradient merge from black into the rest of the stars, and that causes this kind of pinching here. So what that really tells us we need to do is that we're going to need to crop this image for the merge. So it isn't cropping the subpanels individually, it's cropping the overall area of the mosaic so that we aren't going to have these weird funky corners that start to merge out of whack. So those are all easily solvable, but you kind of a lot of times need this initial mosaic here to use as a reference for things like your crop reference. So we'll just kind of keep this to the side for now until we're ready to come back to it. As a matter of fact, I've got a copy of that ready to go right here. So, but as I said before, we need to do our background extractions. So if you can notice in here, there is a gradient already in this file, which is just going to make that gradient merge have to work harder. So let's do our background extractions here. So I'm just going to do automatic background extractions on all 4 of these. So go ahead and do 1. And you can see it definitely found the gradient there, so I just need to make sure that we're doing our subtraction, and I'll just discard the background model just to be quick here. So there we go. Wow, it took out a lot of gradient on that. There we go there. And the last one. All right, all those are showing a lot more contrast now. So even the automatic background extractor did a pretty good job. On your finals, you may want to do a dynamic background extractor or do both. Whatever your normal process is to make sure that you've got the actual panels as cleaned up as possible from a gradient standpoint. So go ahead and close that down. And now we'll go back. These still have their coordinates in, so we're going to need to be replacing these registered files, right? That's kind of our next step here so we can get the gradients out of the way. So we'll go ahead and go back to our mosaic by coordinates script. Still the same files, they've just been updated, and we'll run that one more time. And that's done. So now we have new, cleaned up, and registered guys here. But as we saw in the previous thing, we still had pinching going on in these areas where they don't quite match. And that's where we want to start looking at some cropping. So let me line these up here just so I keep myself in order, kind of know what we're looking at. So we had our first merge that we did, and we had these pinchings. So we've taken care of this kind of gradient piece, so hopefully these are in a little bit better shape. And now we've also got to deal with this. The best way to deal with this here is to do a crop across the entire kind of initial mosaic, and then apply that to our registered panels of that same mosaic. So we're going to come into Processes and Dynamic Crop. We'll start by drawing out this guy here, and then we'll just go pixel peep to try to make everything line up the way we would like it to be. Squish that in. And I'm not worried about trying to cut out any of the pinching that's going on specifically. I want to cut out the edges, because the edges are what's causing that pinching. I'd like to get as much of my data as possible here. It looks like I'm coming out a little bit there, so we'll bring it in. And just kind of scanning through on each one of these edges. Oh, wow, we need to come up a lot on that one. Come up from this side. Now, if you notice on some of these, maybe you're getting close to cutting off things that you don't want. One of the things you can do is you can always play with the rotation angle here. If you can find a crop that fits in that side a little bit better. I'm just going to do it quickly here without going through that piece of it. Okay, looks like that's our low point, so we'll bring that in. And then when I zoom back out, so that will cut out all of these kind of areas here. So that sounds good. Let's go ahead and do that. And now what we'll want to do is apply that same crop. Let me shrink this down a little bit to each one of these. So the way we can do that is through the History Explorer. Go and find that first merge view. And it has all the history that we've done here. So I want to take that dynamic crop and just drag it right on to the same one. And that'll apply that same crop now to that image. And then we can just do that for each of these here. So this one should be pretty obvious how that crop comes in. You can see all that black on the side got chopped off. Do it on that one. And then we'll do it on this one. So now that should give us a mosaic that has a little bit better kind of edging in here, and we'll see if it can take care of those things there. So on the gradient merge, remember, this only deals with files, so we need to go ahead and save these. And it may feel like I'm doing some of these steps out of order because I'm coming up with something and then there's a mistake. And the main reason why I'm kind of doing this is because I was running across these mistakes. So I wouldn't follow what I'm doing in exact order. I would kind of watch through, see where those mistakes were, and try to solve them earlier in your process than I did originally. So now I've got those saved in. Let's add the files back in. We're looking for our ones that have a 1 at the end of it here. And you can put them in different folders or something. Just keep yourself organized. We'll go ahead and run this one again and see what it looks like now. All right. Oh my goodness. That looks so much better, doesn't it? We've solved one set of problems and now we've come up with new ones, right? And, you know, really what it comes down to is once we did that dynamic background extraction, we ended up with different intensities on the different panels. So now it's trying to do its best to figure out what's going on here. And so we need to start figuring out how do we best match these intensities, right? Because this isn't going to fly. The one we had before looked better than this, right? So, you know, we'll call this one the second merge. Actually, it doesn't like numbers. So second merge. And we'll keep that one to the side as a comparison point here. So what we need to do is go through and figure out how to make sure that the background sky values of this panel match the background sky values of this panel, et cetera, right? And there's a neat script for doing this. You can do things like linear fit, which is one of the processes that is in PixInsight, and that can do a pretty good job. One that I've seen recommended that I've been playing around with and like is a script called DNA linear fit. Now, this is not included in PixInsight off the bat. It's something that a PixInsight user wrote and works pretty well. I will put a link to the website to go through where he discusses this particular script and goes through how to get it and how to install it in PixInsight. But in my case, I'm just going to take advantage of it. So in order to use that DNA linear fit script, we first want to make sure that all of our registered images have the same general stretch applied to them. So now we want to use the ones that have been cropped for us here. So if you notice, these are the ones that have been cropped. So these four we don't really need. So we're going to go ahead and just move those out to the side in case we need to come back to them so we don't get confused. And you can also use the different workspaces. But so let's go ahead and pick this one here. And we're going to apply that screen transfer function. We're going to open up the other four. And I'll let you know, this one you kind of may need to do one at a time and keep coming back to it. You apply, drag over there, and you see the stretch came in. It looks different than this because they had different background intensities. Apply the stretch again, put it on that one. There we go. Stretch again, put it on the last one. All right, so now we've got each of these here. And then we want to run the linear fit script. So under utilities, DNA linear fit, if you've installed it, it's just going to say what's the reference view, what's the target view. You kind of can't click around once you've got it open, so I'm going to cancel it for just a second here. And what we're looking at is the Veil 1 is our reference view, and then we're going to do it for each of the other ones here. So it's the registered one. So Veil 1, registered 1. We want to do it on Veil 2, registered 1 to start with. We'll just say OK. And one of the things you may notice is this one's saying it clipped some pixels there. Now, the one that we applied to is this one. And because this one and this one were so different in intensities, there might have been some clipping because this was the darker one. So you may want to just kind of go back and forth and figure out which one kind of gets you the result without clipping through. But you just do that for each of these four here. So we want to be on Veil 1 as our start off for each one of these. And we did 2. Now we're doing 3. As soon as it shows you that it's done, and we'll go 4. Yeah, in my case, I probably picked one that was too dark. I probably could have gone the other way around, but at least now the background intensities should be the same for all of these here. All right, so I'm going to do a little bit of a jump here now to really cut some of the iteration short. You know, it's a very iterative process when you're working through these. You're going to need to try to make sure that when you're doing that linear fit, that you find the combination that gives kind of the most pleasing result. And I would recommend you may want to scale down your larger images so you can do some of these faster iterations just to see what the balance looks like for you. But at the end of the day, you're looking for panels that all look very, very similar in terms of those intensities, and are going to create the best possible, merge in. Now, the last thing that'll happen, and unfortunately I don't have an example to show this, is the idea of pinch stars, which would mean when you have a bright star right up against the edge, you can see I'm actually cutting it out here, and it tries to merge. Sometimes the gradient will look really funky right there because the star was half on, half off. So to take care of that, in general, you're just going to go to the clone stamp tool. Now, don't feel bad. You're not really altering your data at the end of the day. You're just taking one piece of an overlap out and leaving the other overlap in. But for that, you just start with doing a control click. Yeah, control click to pick one of these black areas out there, and then, literally just click again to kind of get the edges of that star out of the mix. So it's just not going to worry about trying to look at that in general. I'm just going to exit out of that since I'd already done it. And then once you have those panels together, you go ahead and run it. And you can also play with your shrink radius and your feather radius, depending on how smooth your seams look like when they come out. But when you run through it, you should end up with a fairly pleasing result, So let's take a look and see what this looks like once we've done that linear fit on everything and we've chomped a couple of those edge stars that might have been a problem on one or two of the panels. And here is our final result on that. So now at this point we can start doing a little bit of pixel peeping. So this is the dead center. This is where all four are coming together. And just scrolling up through this. Now I can still see a little bit of a line here that's more in the noise. You see the noise profile is a little different here to there, and I'll try to zoom in a little bit more. It might make it a little bit easier to tell that this is a little bit crunchier than that is. And I'm really never going to get past that. That's things like averaging things and different seeing and all that kind of good stuff. But this is all deep in that background noise. So all of this is going to be essentially black in my final image anyways. So I don't particularly care about that. I more care about what does it look like when I'm transitioning right here in one of my high signal areas. And I don't really see any seams at all. I don't really see any real difference. So I feel pretty good about that. And so I just inspect kind of each of the general areas where my seams would occur. And then once I feel like, nope, I think I've got it as good as I can here, you save that up as your final and you move on. Now, I'd be remiss without showing you what I would call a cheater method. It's really good for start-off mosaics, and you could use it for the finals as well, but it does have a little bit more variability in that process there, but it is, to be honest, a whole heck of a lot faster. And that's using Microsoft's ICE program. So to start off with here, you would go and take your individual panels, make sure they're stretched and not still linear, save them as TIFFs, and then you're going to open up the Microsoft ICE or Image Composite Editor program. I'll put a link to this in the description. And this program is really used for stitching panoramas together if you've got a bunch of pictures, either from a video or from individual, like vacation photos, things like that, but also works pretty well for using machine learning on star matching. So we're going to come in here, we're going to find our files that we have. We have our 4 TIFF files here. We'll go ahead and open them up. And then it really is going through this import, stitch, crop, export. That's really it. So you can leave it under the auto detect here for the panorama type here. We've got our 4 images. We're going to move to stitch. So here it's going to try to align them up and composite them, and oh my gosh, it did it, right? So you'd see it's pretty fast. And, you know, looking at this here, just want to try to get the general kind of area in here. And it looks like, are these in the right order? Sure look like it is. So then we're going to move into crop. So we'll just kind of crop that down, crop that down, crop that down, crop that down. Get those edges off. And at any point in time, we can zoom in and take a look here. But for right now, I'm going to move on to step 4. So now we're cropped here. So before we save this out, though, let's just take a look and see how good it did with the seams. It did a pretty good job here. You know, I can see a little bit of change here right along this border. It's not a hard line though, and that's pretty good. But looking through here, I really don't see a lot of problems in this stitch. And you can see how fast it did it. I mean, this was, you know, just a couple of seconds in order to go through all of this. But some of the things that I do notice is your noise profiles tend to be a little bit different. I still feel like I've got some additional gradienting and lightening and things like that than I would have over in my final one over here. But time savings wise, that may not matter to you. You know, this is looking pretty solid overall here. So this is one way that you can kind of quickly go through and stitch together a mosaic, either as your reference frame, or if you just don't want to do all the other rigmarole and you feel like your data is strong enough after this to move forward, the image composite editor from Microsoft may be a really, really good way to go. And then to save it up, you just pick your file format. You can save it back out as a TIFF. Just like you did originally there. I'm going to say include alpha channel here, and we'll say export to disk. We'll put it right back where we were. Final stitch, exporting that, and then in your case, you'd run back into PixInsight. And then there's your final stitch in here, and you're good to continue moving forward. And there we go. Side by side there. This one is the Microsoft automatic put in one. This one's the one from all of the other stuff. Now, one of the things that you might notice, these do not entirely match up. They've been transformed slightly by that process. So you may need to re-register images if you use the Microsoft Stitcher to get it done there. But that's easy enough. It's certainly going to have enough stars to find. But yeah, so the judgment call is really up to you. You know, they're both, in my opinion, real good quality coming out here, and you just kind of have to see, you know, what levels you're willing to accept on those trade-offs between speed and detail to get to your final image. But that's it. That's running through the final stitching process on both sides here, and then you'd want to do that for each of your panels, or each of your channels, and then you'd start combining them together from there. So from that will wrap up this section of the series on the Veil Nebula project. Next time we'll take completed mosaic panels and I'll walk you through the steps of what I did for processing. Now that's an area that takes hours and hours and is really subject to just taste and personal preference. So I'm just going to show you the broad stroke steps that I did without kind of running through each kind of click of the button and waiting for it to process. So I'll just kind of walk you through the steps that I took to show you kind of how it evolved along the way until I got to my final. So that's it for now. Until next time, I wish everybody clear skies. Thanks.